Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I will be sharing my top 10 favorite fantasy and paranormal romances. Recently, I did a video talking about all of my top 10 favorite dark romances, and in that video I said I would be doing more favorites videos for romance subgenres. I was going to do two separate videos for all of my favorite fantasy romances and favorite paranormal romances. However, when I started making the list, I realized I don't have enough favorites, and so I decided to combine all of the fantasy and paranormal ones as well as my favorite sci-fi romances. This favorites video is just filled with fantasy, paranormal, and sci-fi romances that I really love. When I was thinking about my favorite fantasy and paranormal romances, I realized a lot of them were YA and not actual romance ones. I guess I just don't read a lot from these subgenres, which is really weird. So if you have any recommendations for some good paranormal romances and fantasy romances and even sci-fi romances, please leave them down below. So this is my top 10 favorite fantasy, paranormal, and sci-fi romances. They're all just kind of mixed together, and I will go from number 10 to number 1. So coming in at number 10, we have the Wicked Trilogy by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So book 1 is Wicked, book 2 is Torn, and book 3 is Brave. This series is paranormal fantasy. It is about fae. So the first book, Wicked, follows our female character Ivy, who is part of the Order, where they essentially hunt and kill fae. And one night when Ivy is hunting some fae, she comes across kind of this very unexpected fae. He suddenly produces a gun out of nowhere, and normal faes are not known for using human weapons, and so she's very confused. She gets shot. Suddenly some weird things are happening with some fae, and apparently there's like a bigger thing happening, and our male character Ren is a transfer from a different order. He is new to town. Him and Ivy slowly get to know each other, and he's trying to help her figure out what is happening with all of these bad fae and stuff. I did a whole video dedicated to this book and the Passionflix adaptation. I will link that down below if you want to know more of my thoughts on this book and more in-depth thoughts. But the series is really fun. It's nothing super serious. I really enjoyed the characters and the romance. It was just really entertaining and kind of a lighthearted paranormal romance. I really enjoyed this trilogy. Coming in at number 9 is the Titan series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. The first book is The Return. So the Titan series is actually a spin-off series of her Covenant series. The first book is Half-Blood. This is Seth's story, so he was in that series. Now this is his own story, his own romance. This I would say is like a mix of fantasy and paranormal. It deals with Greek mythology and stuff. I would say it's more probably fantasy than paranormal. But like I said, this follows Seth, and he has made a deal with Apollo to kind of pledge his life to the gods and just do whatever they ask of him. And they give him this task to protect Josie, who is this normal college student. So Seth has to protect her for some reason. Of course, the gods don't really tell him exactly why he has to protect her, but he has to get to know her, kind of be friendly towards her. And she has no idea who he is. She has no idea of anything about his world. I feel like it reminds me a lot of what came out back in like 2014 and 15. It was very like reminiscent of that time. I mean, this did come out in 2015, but I feel like a lot of paranormal stories were like that back in the day, where it's like the female character had no idea what was going on and there was like some weird paranormal stuff happening. I really loved the characters and the romance. I really enjoyed Josie as a female character. I thought she was great, and I actually really enjoyed Seth more in his story than the Covenant series. I feel like a lot of people loved him in that series, but I didn't particularly like him, to be honest. I liked him a lot more in his own story. I loved the direction that the series went in, and it was really nice to see some of the old characters as well from the Covenant series. It was just a really fun and entertaining series, kind of like Wicked. It wasn't anything super serious and deep, but it was still really fun, and this series definitely made you care about all of the characters. Coming in at number 8 is the Florentine series by Sylvain Renard. So the first book is The Raven, book 2 is The Shadow, and book 3 is The Roman. So this is a paranormal fantasy. It is mainly about vampires. So the first book, The Raven, follows our female character Raven, who who works at a gallery in Florence, and one night she is walking home from work, I think, and she witnesses this homeless man being beaten up, and she intervenes, and suddenly they start attacking her, and she ends up getting saved by this really dark and mysterious guy. She eventually ends up like blacking out, so she doesn't really fully remember the night, but she knows like something kind of happened that was a little bit unexplainable. And then when she wakes up after the attack happened, she kind of feels a little different, and she realizes that she has been absent for like a week, and that in that time there was a robbery at the gallery that she worked at, and apparently she is the prime suspect. Obviously she can't really explain like why she was absent for a week because she barely remembers what happened, and she's desperate to clear her name, so she decides to contact one of Florence's wealthiest businessmen to help her clear her name and discover the truth and figure out also what happened to her. And he kind of involves her in this very like secretive, dark, mysterious world. It is so interesting. The series is definitely very different. I feel like it had a very refreshing and mysterious take on vampires. I love how also it didn't fully focus on like the vampire aspect, and it kind of like slowly brought you into the world. It didn't completely throw you into the world. I feel like it was very slow and gradual, and I don't know, I really enjoyed the characters and the romance, and yeah, like I said, it's very mystery involved, and I definitely liked that aspect of this series, and it was just a fantastic paranormal romance. Coming in at number 7 is the Immortals After Dark series by Kresley Cole. I'm gonna be honest, it has been years since I have read this series, and I don't fully remember exactly which one is my favorite in the series. I have yet to continue and read book 10, so I feel like I've read a decent amount of the series, and I have really enjoyed it. I really need to continue desperately, but the series is definitely like a mix of both paranormal and fantasy. I would say it's a little bit more paranormal because it does feature a whole bunch of paranormal creatures like vampires, werewolves, shifters, fae. These are the first 2 books. The first one is A Hunger Like No Other, and book 2 is No Rest for the Wicked. I do have to say that these 2 are the only ones I have given 5 stars on Goodreads, so I feel like they are my favorite, but because it has been so long, I don't fully remember which one is my favorite. The first one, A Hunger Like No Other, follows a werewolf who is in search of his mate, and he discovers that his mate is a vampire, and our female character, who is his mate and the vampire, is trying to figure out what happened to her family and her parents, and she's trying to uncover some secrets, and she's also trying to figure out why this so-called werewolf is her mate. This series is really fun. It is very bingeable. I highly recommend if you haven't read this series yet. It is just so good, and I really liked all of the romances, and the characters are also different. The stories are so different. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming because there are so many characters, but once you get into the world, I just feel like you're totally immersed by it and you can't stop reading. I feel like there are so many paranormal or urban fantasy romance series out there that are very long, and I feel like this is definitely one of the better ones. I really enjoyed it, and I, like I said, obviously highly recommend it. Coming in at number 6, we have the Bayou Magic Trilogy by Kristen Proby. So the first book is Shadows, and then book 2 is Spells. Book 3, Serendipity, has yet to come out. That is supposed to come out this October, but I already love this whole trilogy. Like, I love book 1 and book 2, and I just had to include it on this list because I read these last year and really loved them. They definitely stand out to me when I think of paranormal romances or fantasy romance. I just really enjoyed them. So this series in general just follows 3 sisters who each kind of have a little bit of like witch powers. They all have a different and unique ability, I guess. The first book, Shadows, follows Bree, who is this tour guide for like haunted and creepy buildings in the French Quarter, and she can kind of sense like the afterlife. One day after giving a tour, she ends up running into a ghost, and they, for some reason, recognize her, know her by name, and they are asking for her help to find their body. And she suddenly becomes like very scared because usually the ghosts don't recognize her and she can kind of block it out. And she is also drawn to our male character Cash, who was on one of her tours. He is currently visiting New Orleans and he is a former, I think he's a former FBI agent, or he's on vacation. They're both very intrigued by each other, and then a lot of things start happening to Bree, and Cash can't help but want to help her and figure out what is happening. I really enjoyed this series and I really love the romance. Both books are very different but also have a lot of similarities, and I really love all of the sisters. I think they're great. I just thought it was really refreshing, and I don't know, I do feel like they are very simple and very basic, but they just worked for me, and I'm very excited to read the third and final book this October. Coming in at number 5, we have My Midnight Moonlight Valentine by J.J. McEvoy. This is a paranormal romance about vampires, and it follows our female character Druella, who is kind of a new vampire. And one day she is out hunting in the forest and she comes across this other vampire who is naked, and he kind of has just slaughtered a bunch of humans. And she's a little shocked, and he claims that he has lost a century of his memory and he doesn't know where he is or how he got there, but he recognizes Druella and he thinks that she is his mate. So they team up to figure out how he lost his memory, like how he got there and why he thinks that she's his mate. So far there are only 2 books out. I also really did love the second book. I don't own it in physical copy yet. I don't know if there is going to be more than 3 books, but I do know there is supposed to be a 3rd book coming out soon. I loved the romance. The romance is so good in this series. If you want a very romantic, protective, yet super understanding and super emotional type of male character, like, I highly recommend this series. Like, Theseus is such a fantastic male character. I really love him, and I loved Druella. I thought she was a fantastic character. She's so strong, so independent, but yet she's still really emotional and just able to share her feelings and her opinions and thoughts. I just love both of these characters and the romance, and I loved the whole setting and the whole world and the whole vibe of the book. It was just so good. I know a lot of people have loved J.J. McEvoy's Mafia series, but this is better in my opinion. I loved this so much more. I loved everything about book 1 and book 2. And obviously it is one of my favorite paranormal romances. It is just so good, and I really need the 3rd book. Coming in at number 4, I have Veronica's Dragon and Willa's Beast by Ruby Dixon. So Veronica's Dragon and Willa's Beast are book 2 and book 3 in the Isom series. This is a spin-off of her Planet Barbarians series as well. These 2 are my favorite books in the whole Isom series. These are the ones that I loved the most. They stuck with me the most. These are sci-fi paranormal romances about aliens. The Isom series is very similar to her Planet Barbarians series, where it just follows a bunch of women who land on this alien planet where they mate with the aliens on this planet, because sadly there's no way that they'll be able to go back home to Earth. So they get this kind of like parasite type thing that helps them survive on this like new planet. And that parasite also gives what is called a resonance, and that basically means like you find your soulmate in another person and you resonate with them, and then you become mates. The series really isn't that complicated, and I feel like I'm overcomplicating it. It's really fun. It's really funny. It also deals with some serious topics, and occasionally it can be really heavy a little bit, but Ruby Dixon does a great job of mixing the humor with the serious stuff. I really loved Veronica's Dragon and Willa's Beast. These obviously were my 2 favorites in the series. I really loved them. I feel like there isn't much to say about this series because I feel like it definitely is a series that you have to read for yourself to kind of understand it. I don't know, there was just something about these 2 particular books that really stood out to me, and I just really enjoyed the romance and the characters. Yeah, this whole series is really great. I do totally recommend it, but book 2 and book 3 are hands down my favorites. Like I said, I really loved the characters and their romance, and I love how this series doesn't just include aliens, it kind of includes a little bit more of like a mix of like weird different creatures, kind of dragons and like lizards a little bit, I guess. It's kind of weird, but you gotta read it to understand. And then coming in at number 3 is the Planet Barbarians series by Ruby Dixon. I feel like this was pretty obvious that this was going to be my number 3 pick. This again is another sci-fi romance, sci-fi paranormal. It's about aliens. This is basically the same thing as the Ice Home series. It just follows a bunch of women who get abducted by these really bad aliens, and the ship ends up crashing on this ice planet, and they come in contact with the aliens that live on that planet, and they eventually have to adapt and live there, and eventually they all fall in love with these aliens. My favorites are definitely these two. So Planet Barbarians is number 1 and Barbarian Mine is book number 4. These are definitely my 2 favorites in the whole series. I also really love Barbarian's Touch, which is book 8. I would say these are like my top 3 in the whole Planet Barbarians series. I just thought this series was really fun and funny. Again, it also had that serious tone. I feel like with the first couple of books, the serious topics aren't handled that well, but they do get better as the series progresses. There is just something so addicting and fun about these books. They're also super smutty. There's a lot of sex scenes, but it's just such a fun and unique world, and you can't help but care about all the characters. They're just like this big founded family, and it's so great. And I love how they all work together and they all struggle through things together, but they all, at the end of the day, make the best out of all of their situations. I know this series seems very weird. It is weird, but it is so fun and so good. And it is obviously at number 3 on my list for a reason. Coming in at number 2 is the Souls Trilogy by Deborah Harkness. So book 1 is A Discovery of Witches, book 2 is Shadow of Night, and book 3 is The Book of Life. I love this series. It has been years since I have read the books, but I remember really loving them, and I love the TV show. It is so good. I highly recommend watching that. So Discovery of Witches follows Diana Bishop, who is a descendant of witches, but she doesn't really practice magic, and she doesn't really feel like she has a lot of control over it, and she just kind of pretends that it's not really a part of her life. And one day she's in a library working on a paper, I believe it's something about alchemy, and she uncovers this book in the library that has been lost for centuries. And suddenly all of these creatures, vampires, witches, and demons want this book, and they think that she has it, but she had sent it back in the library. And so now people are wondering how she can bring this book up. Like, what spell did she use? Why is she the one that found it after it being lost for centuries? Like, what is so special about Diana Bishop? And one person who desperately wants this book is Matthew Claremont, and he becomes really interested in Diana Bishop and the book, but he realizes that maybe it's not just the book that he wants. I love this series. I love Diana and Matthew. I love their whole romance. This book has a lot of magic, paranormal stuff. It also has a decent amount of historical stuff. It's just such a unique story and very complex, and like I said, I loved all the characters and I just love this whole world. I do feel like there are some parts of this series that could be a little long and boring, but I feel like once you push through, you get really into the world and the characters, and you can't stop reading. Like, you just want to know what happens to them, and you can't help but root for them. I obviously highly recommend reading this book and watching the TV show, or at least just watch the TV show. I just feel like not a lot of people are talking about this series, and I'm obsessed with both the book and the TV show, and I just need more people to be obsessed with this like I am. Coming in at number 1, this is my favorite paranormal fantasy sci-fi romance, and that is The Lover Awakened by J.R. Ward. This is book 3 in the Dagger Brotherhood series. This is a vampire romance. I will also say that The King is my second favorite in the series. These two I love the most out of this whole series. The King is Wrath and Beth's continuation, I guess. They're the first couple in the first book, Dark Lover, but this is kind of like technically their second book. It's kind of continuation, and I really loved this one as well, so I did want to just quickly mention this one. So basically the Dagger Brotherhood series is a brotherhood of vampires, kind of just like this little clan, this little family, and they're just trying to survive and kill their enemies, essentially. So this one follows Sadist, I'm gonna butcher his name the entire video, I'm so sorry. He's kind of described as the most scary and terrifying vampire. He is like the scariest out of them all, and he is a former blood slave, so he has a lot of like past trauma, and he is just trying to do better and be a better vampire and not let his past define him. And one night he ends up saving our female character Bella, who is also a vampire, and she becomes like super into him, and she's so grateful that he saved her, and they are super attracted to each other. But Zetas struggles a lot with his past, like I said, and he doesn't think that he is worthy of true love and of someone loving him, and Bella is determined to make him see that he is worth love, and she just slowly tries to help him to overcome his past so that they could have a future together. This book is so beautiful. I loved the characters. I loved the romance. Bella and Zetas are definitely my favorite couple in the whole series, obviously, and then it is followed by Wrath and Beth. Those are like my top 2 favorite couples. I really, really love them. I have yet to continue the series. I am up to book 15. I have yet to read The Chosen. I kind of took a little bit of a break from the series. I wasn't really enjoying the direction that the series was going in, so I just thought I would take a pause, and I have yet to continue, sadly. But this book is just so intense and so heartbreaking, but also like heartwarming at the same time. You can't help but root for both of them, and you just want them to be happy and in love. I felt so awful for Zetas the whole book. Like, he just struggles so much, and you just want to give him a big hug. I loved their romance. I loved how Bella did not give up on him, and I love how she really just stood by him and really tried to help him, and I just feel like they truly are meant to be together, and I just loved their romance, and I loved the direction that this book went in, and yeah, it was just so good. And this is my favorite paranormal romance, fantasy romance. It is my favorite. I love it so much. Alright, so that is it for my top 10 favorite fantasy, paranormal, and sci-fi romances. Let me know if you have read any of these and what your thoughts are on them, or let me know what your top 10 favorites paranormal, fantasy, sci-fi romances are. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!